Happy holidays, everybody, and Tony here with my tribute to the third Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Christmas episode, Twas the Night Before Christening, which aired on NBC on December 20, 1993. This was directed by Shelley Jensen, it was written by Maya Williams and Eddie Gordetsky, and the guest stars were Boyz II Men's Michael McCrary, Sean Stockman, Nathan Morris, and Wanya Morris. As I stated before in the previous video where I was talking about Aunt Viv's cast change, this marked Daphne Maxwell Reid's first Christmas episode as the new Aunt Viv. And if you want to find out more details about this particular cast change, I highly suggest you go watch the previous video. But here's the short version. Around season 3, Janet Hubert fell pregnant and was dealing with her recently unemployed ex-huband while also having a backstage feud with Will Smith and Alfonso Ribeiro. Overlooking the personal tensions that befell Janet Hubert, she was also given a new contract by NBC stating that her work hours were going to be shortened to 10 weeks, her screen time was also going to be shortened as well as her salary. Not accepting of these new conditions, she ended up leaving the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air only to be replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid as the new Aunt Viv. Going to the third Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Christmas episode, I was so excited to catch this because, as I stated before, Boyz II Men were the guest stars, and I grew up with this particular boy band ever since I was a little boy, and I thoroughly loved their use of harmony as well as how beautifully their voices blended together no matter what song they sung. With that said, let's get cracking. This episode begins in Christmas 1998, where we see Uncle Phil recount the story to his now 5-year-old little son Nicky about how he acquired his 4 middle names. Now, for those of you who watch The Baby Comes Out, you'll realize that Uncle Phil christened the youngest Banks kid as Nicholas Andrew Banks. That element ended up being retconned in favor of Nicholas having 4 names based on the 4 members of Boyz II Men, who serve as not only being guest stars, but plot elements involving the Banks family, and especially involving Will. The flashback commences to 1993, where the Banks family plus Will are preparing for the holidays, specifically for little Nicky's christening. Will has a king puppet in store for little Nicky, which unfortunately for Jeffrey he finds quite embarrassing. However, as opposed to Will's gift of a puppet for little Nicky, his cousin's gifts are far more extravagant than the one he has. Carlton's gift for Nicky is a mini car. Ashley's is a baby stroller that moves to Boyz II Men's songs whenever she plays their CD. Uncle Phil even brags about how his gift will be the best out of all the family members, and even Jazz gives little Nicky a Rolex. The Boyz II Men plot element does come into motion when Ashley mentions to the family that she purchased an autographed album of Boyz II Men. Will then exposes to Jazz that he personally knew Boyz II Men when he was growing up in Philadelphia. Overhearing all this, Aunt Viv is so overjoyed and excited to know that Will has invited Boyz II Men to come over and perform at little Nicky's christening. As expected, Boyz II Men are in Bel-Air recording their new holiday album, supervised by the recording producer Charlie, played by Charles E. Alston. As Will enters the recording booth, he tries not to be so suspicious until he stops the recording, applauds Boyz II Men, and as soon as Michael, Sean, Nathan, and Wanya come out of the recording studio, they automatically recognize Will. Even Nathan. And here's something that was so interesting about one moment where the camera focuses on Nathan when he's singing his solo. It's as if to suggest that he's going to play a very important role in not only the entire story, but also to what happened between him and Will. And no sooner has this been divulged as Nathan inquires Will about Niecy, his former girlfriend. Will says that he knows Niecy and that he also liked her, but she was already in love with Nathan, who Will jokingly calls him a 4-eyed, thick-lipped loser. As Niecy was no longer interested in Nathan, Will ended up taking her away from him. As Will is divulging the story, Nathan exclaims that he has been crying himself to sleep every time he thought about Niecy, and even orders Charlie that should he Michael, Sean, and Wanya see Will ever again, they're gonna have him thrown out. Will then tries to clarify things with Niecy to no avail. Cut to Jeffrey, who is so sick and tired of being ordered around and around by the Banks family, even though it is Christmas. Even Ashley gets the hint that Jeffrey needs something for Christmas, as he has been doing a lot of favors for the family, but they've done nothing for him. Will's mom, Vi, arrives at the house looking as fabulous as ever, and she's very excited to be Nikki's godmother. But her prospects of being Nikki's godmother are dashed as Helen arrives dressed in the same outfit as her. Even Hillary descends from the stairs dressed in the same outfit as both Vi and Helen, only for her to not be involved in the scuffle as she heads back upstairs to change into a different outfit. Vi and Helen end up feuding as to who is going to be Nikki's godmother. Vivian tries to calm both of her sisters down by stating that she asked both Vi and Helen to be the godmothers by accident, which left both Vi and Helen really incredulous at this recent development in the christening planning. Even Will tried to explain to his mother that he's not so sure if Boys to Men are going to come over to the christening, but Vi brushes all of Will's concerns away as she states that she's going to be so proud of Will for bringing Boys to Men to the christening. Since Carlton wants to be dressed up as Santa Claus for little Nikki's christening, this leaves Will an idea, as he ends up borrowing Carlton's Santa Claus outfit without his consent. Cut to Boys to Men in the recording studio as they are left utterly shocked at just the amount of work they have to do throughout the holidays. And who else comes in the recording studio but Will disguised as Santa Claus? Will as Santa exposits to Boys to Men that there is someone who wants them to perform at a christening, specifically Will. And this also leads to a very funny moment in which Wanya asks if there's going to be a reception, with Will as Santa responding that yes, there is going to be food after the christening. However, Will's Santa disguise is all for naught when his beard was being tugged by a microphone, thus causing Boys to Men to automatically recognize Will, and they're about to beat him up, but Will disguised as Santa escapes from their wrath. At the christening, we see a throng of guests entering, especially when they're greeted by Reverend Boyd, portrayed by Sullivan Walker. And for someone with a very limited screen time, I definitely enjoyed Sullivan Walker as Reverend Boyd. He had this sort of elegance and strong presence that made him absolutely noble and really eloquent in his manner, especially when he's paired with Joseph Marcel's Jeffrey. I almost thought that Sullivan Walker and Joseph Marcel could pass as brothers, considering how similar they looked and considering the cadences they have in their voices when they speak, as well as their similar manners of how they express themselves. In another lifetime, I would have loved to see Reverend Boyd and Jeffrey have their own spin-off show, which would be just as hilarious and just as cheeky, considering that moment between Reverend Boyd and Jeffrey, highlighted by Reverend Boyd inquiring Jeffrey if he's a member of the family, only for Jeffrey to retort that he's the member of the family who does all the chores around the house. And that moment right there between Sullivan Walker as Reverend Boyd and Joseph Marcel's as Jeffrey was absolute comic gold. As the christening is about to be prepared, Vi and Helen are still arguing. Since Aunt Viv can't take this anymore, she decides that the only best thing to do is appoint Jeffrey as Nikki's godfather. And I definitely like this moment because throughout the episode, we've seen Jeffrey just feeling rather miserable, which did not help matters that Jeffrey wore a bah humbug apron to illustrate his cynicism of the holidays, as well as how he barely gets anything from the Banks during this festive season. It looks like Jeffrey's Christmas wish has come true, as he ends up receiving the gift of being little Nikki's godfather, spearheaded by none other than Aunt Viv herself. Will was about to confess his failed attempt at bringing Boys to Men over to the christening. However, to his surprise, and to everybody's surprise, Boys to Men enter by singing their arrangement of Silent Night. Now, this was the major highlight of this episode. Boys to Men singing Silent Night and using their harmonic arrangements to make this song come to life. And their use of 4-point harmony manages to make me feel at utter awe and utter amazement as to how beautifully their voices blended together. When it comes to how it's arranged, each member starts off by singing the first lines of Silent Night, only for them to evolve into a 4-part harmony where they sing the rest of the verses, with Sean, Nathan, and Wanya singing tenor, and Michael singing bass. And speaking of Michael, he ends up greeting Will a curt Merry Christmas, which goes to show that despite whatever bad blood happened between Boyz II Men and Will, can be subsided, for it is the holiday season. And going to Boyz II Men's version of Silent Night, I was almost in tears thanks to their god-tier use of harmony and how their voices blended so beautifully. There was not one moment where I thought something was off. In fact, everything was blended so superbly. And there's even a moment where Vi and Helen end up reconciling after their previous feud. And wouldn't you know it, everybody loved Boyz II Men's rendition of Silent Night, which in turn was also Will's gift to little Nicky. As a result, Nicky's complete name is Nicholas Michael Sean Nathan Wanya Banks, with Boyz II Men's first names being used as Nicky's 4 middle names. The episode ends with Jeffrey entering to see how little Nicky is doing, and both of them say I love you to each other, only for little Nicky to say that he wants some chocolate milk, which I thought ended the episode in such a hilarious fashion. Twas the Night Before Christening was, to me, just as great as Christmas Show. In fact, they're both tied as my personal favorite Christmas episodes of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, with Twas the Night Before Christening almost approaching the god-tier quality of Christmas Show. The major highlight of this episode was seeing and hearing Boyz II Men put their great harmonics to use in singing Silent Night. As I stated before, their rendition of Silent Night brought me to tears in the most positive way because they used their 4-part harmony in a way that many other singers wish they could be just as great in. With Michael singing bass, Sean singing tenor, Nathan singing tenor, and Wanya singing tenor, these 4 gentlemen managed to make my listening experience to their rendition of Silent Night all the more worthwhile listening to over and over again. And I also love the rendition of Let It Snow, which had that nice jazzy feeling as well as that feeling which makes you feel relaxed and calm, all while sitting beside the fireplace on a cold winter's eve. And here's something I've noticed about little Nicky being portrayed by a different actor than what we've expected in season 5 to 6. Gregory Wheeler ended up portraying little Nicky before the role was overtaken by Ross Bagley from seasons 5 to 6. And I thought that was rather interesting because Gregory Wheeler managed to bring in such a childlike innocence to this character. And although I would have loved to have Ross Bagley as little Nicky just to show some consistency, I thought that Gregory Wheeler's portrayal of little Nicky was really sweet. And for those of you who caught Twas the Night Before Christening, what'd you think of it? Did you really love Boyz II Men's use of 4-part harmony in their rendition of Silent Night to the point where it brought you to tears in the most positive way? Was there a moment that you thought was really hilarious to the point where you were rolling on the floor with laughter? Or did you feel like there was something about this episode that was either off or left you bored? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my tribute to Twas the Night Before Christening. Tune in much later for my tribute to the final Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Christmas episode, I Oh Baby Baby. So until then, happy holidays, everybody!